Welcome, everyone. The regular meeting of the Kansas City Public Schools Board of Directors for May 10th, 2023 is called to order.
Your mic's not on.
Oh, it's not? Is it on now? There we go. Okay, welcome, everyone. We apologize for being a few minutes behind. The regular meeting of the Kansas City Public Schools Board of Directors for May 10th, 2023 is called to order. Lisa, please call the roll.
Ms. Buckner?
Here.
Ms. Curls? Here. Ms. Ford?
Here.
Mr. Jackaway?
Here.
Ms. Kendricks?
Here.
Ms. Cortez?
Here. Thank you. Are there any proposed changes to the agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Lisa, please call the roll.
Ms. Buckner?
Yes.
Ms. Curls?
Yes.
Ms. Ford?
Yes.
Mr. Jackaway? Ms. Kendricks?
Yes.
And Ms. Cortez?
Yes. Thank you. The agenda is approved. Lisa, are there any outstanding action items?
We have no action items at this time.
Thank you. With that, the chair recognizes Dr. Collier, who will introduce the report.
Thank you, Board Chair Cortez. This evening, we're going to start with superintendent's announcements, and then we'll have a quick summer academy update. We know there are lots of questions and interest in what is happening for summer, this summer for our students. And then we will end our presentations this evening with our workshop presentation, policy 0.0, which is our equity policy. So we'll have an update there, as well as a culturally responsive curriculum audit report. So starting with the superintendent's announcements, we're going to begin responding to some public comments where it's appropriate. And so this is our first evening doing this. We want to make sure that as our community comes and shares their thoughts, concerns, and interests, that we are creating a cyclical process where we are responding and sharing in return. So hopefully this will be helpful as we move forward. And so the first item that we're responding to was based on a public comment made at the April 26th board meeting regarding 100% of kindergartners advancing to the first grade in KCPS. And we just want to make sure that everyone knows that historically, as well as currently, KCPS has retained kindergartners when it was necessary. It's not something we desire to do, but we know in some cases it is necessary. However, that decision is always made in consultation and partnership with parents and caregivers. And I can say firsthand as a principal, I remember sitting down with parents myself and talking to some of them around their students' performance. And together, we made the decision to retain those kindergartners. But once again, that's always done in consultation and partnership with families. We also want to make sure that we respond to the claim that KCPS is not correctly using federal funds. And so KCPS follows a school-wide funding model for federal dollars that allows each school to survey their stakeholders to determine the unique individual needs of the building based on the achievement data. These needs are then funded with the federal dollars allocated to each school. The funding model allows us to serve all students in Title I buildings, but it does not limit the funding to serving students who are only qualifying for free and reduced lunch. We serve all. In 2021-22, when ESSER money was allocated, KCPS surveyed our parents, students, teachers, and administrators, and we determined that the most effective ways to spend ESSER 2 and 3 funding through that process, schools without sufficient funding to pay for a full-time interventionist from their title funding were allowed to use ESSER funds for this position. Currently, 27 interventionists are funded through Title I dollars, with only 12 interventionists funded for ESSER. And when I say interventionists, we have reading and math interventionists allocated for all of our buildings. The Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education encouraged the use of ESSER dollars to be spent on full-time employees to help mitigate any learning loss that may have occurred during COVID-19. ESSER 3 funding guidelines stipulate a minimum of 20% of the LEA's allocation must be, and when we say LEA, we're just talking about the school district, must be spent to address the students' academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs because of lost instructional time during the pandemic. So KCPS is fully compliant with this requirement. As with any federal funding, an interventionist must be highly qualified at the point of hire, and there are currently 2 funded positions that have not been filled. And also, we want to add that KCPS undergoes yearly audits of our spending practices related to federal funds. There have not been any findings of misappropriation of funding in 10 years, and we do not anticipate any findings in the future. The next item is a much lighter note. Teacher appreciation. And here in KCPS, we acknowledge our teachers and all of our staff. We started off teacher appreciation on Friday, May 5th, with free tickets to the Royals game that evening. Friday was the perfect night to attend because their swag giveaway was a very nice Royal crew neck t-shirt. We had about 240 tickets that were available, and teachers wasted no time signing up, reserving their tickets, and they had a great day at the K. I also recorded a video that went out to staff on Monday, expressing my sincere gratitude to all teachers and staff for their hard work and their dedication, ensuring that our students receive an exceptional education. I emphasize that all staff are important and that we understand that every employee, regardless of their position, whether they're in the classroom or whatever role it is that they're playing, they are actually playing a very integral part in educating our students. We want to continue to work as a community of educators to ensure that our students receive the education that they rightfully deserve. This week, all staff are also receiving a lunch that is being delivered to every school for all staff, all of our auxiliary facilities, and the Board of Education. We believe some schools may have already received their lunches. I know some of them were received yesterday, some today, and then some will be received on Thursday and Friday of this week. And again, this is just a small gesture to say thank you and to let our staff know how proud we are of them, their hard work, and their commitment. Next week, we will also be sharing another token of appreciation, which will be a surprise to our teachers and staff. So we're excited about highlighting the great things our teachers and staff members are doing and showing our appreciation for them throughout the month of May. Many people, when they have birthdays, they won't say they're celebrating just that birthday. They celebrate the month. So this month, we are celebrating our teachers and our staff. I want to pause for just a moment. I have a board member, Ms. Candace Buckner, that would also like to share some words regarding teacher and staff appreciation.
This week, we celebrate Teacher and Staff Appreciation Week to honor the outstanding and tireless work of our educators and those who support their work day in and day out. Every day, our teachers and staff commit themselves to bringing out the best in our kids academically, socially, and emotionally. In my years as a classroom teacher and now as someone who teaches and coaches classroom teachers, I know bringing their best every day is a challenging and under-acknowledged commitment on the part of our teachers and staff. It takes a team in every one of our schools to deliver on this promise, to welcome, feed, educate, protect, clean up for and after, nurse, counsel, support, and guide our kids every day. Saying thank you today is simply to note an important moment in time. With each of your commitment, our teachers and staff, our kids can thrive. Our work as a board is to ensure that we provide each of you with the tools, the support, the love, and the caring to bring out the best in our kids. Thank you for all you do every day. You are seen, you are heard, and you are valued.
Thank you, Ms. Buckner. All right, our next announcement, and I don't have a clicker, so somebody has to keep moving. We want to acknowledge that May is also Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and we want to observe this annually, and we have started doing this as a school district, acknowledging the contributions that Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders have made to the history, the culture, and the achievements of the United States. On May 4th, KCPS held our AAPI Heritage Month Lunch and Learn to facilitate meaningful conversations about the AAPI experience in America. And I have to say, it was absolutely beautiful in this boardroom, and it was a beautiful experience learning more about the AAPI experience and cultures in America. Also occurring this month is our AAPI Heritage Month envelope decorating contest. All students are encouraged to participate. Using any size envelope, students are to create a decorative envelope, all sides, with words, phrases, and/or pictures that wish good fortune, good luck, and happiness for someone else. So we look forward to acknowledging our students who are engaging in this envelope decorating contest. All right, our next graduation, we know May is that time of year where we're culminating the educational journey of our students who have reached that senior year, and they're preparing to cross the stage. And we just want to make sure that you are aware of the graduations that are coming and the dates, and you can see those displayed on the screen. They're all happening next week. The middle college is happening on Monday at Manual Career Tech, and then the remaining graduations will be held at UMKC on May 16th. We have Paseo and Lincoln. May 17th, we have Southeast and East, and then May 18th, we have Central High and Northeast High. Next slide, please. Moving Forward Together. We had our kickoff for Moving Forward Together on April 25th. In attendance were students, staff, families, and community members. We provided a brief historical context of our systems analysis, our Blueprint 2030 process, and we talked about what brought us to where we are today as we begin moving forward together. This work allowed our KCPS community to work collaboratively to ensure that our school system is consistently student-centered, it will be culturally affirming, and a community-supported place where all children can thrive academically, socially, and emotionally. We had about 35 participants that evening representing our students, parents, staff, and board community. To date, we have 72 people who have signed up for Moving Forward Together and have indicated on which committee they'd like to serve. We took time also to introduce Dr. Dennis Carpenter from Aspirational Insights, who will serve as our third-party facilitator throughout the process. And then on the screen there, you can see the future meetings that are coming for the month of May and June. You can see which committees which committees will be held on those dates. Anyone that is interested, once again, you're welcome to attend. I don't see the QR code on the screen. I wish it was there so that you could access it, but we do have it on our website. So if you're interested in joining one of these committees, feel free to just go online, indicate to us that you'd like to be a part, and then also let us know if you're interested in serving as a co-lead. Right now, we have quite a few community members and parents who have signed up to potentially be a co-lead on these committees. So we look forward to you joining us in this initiative as well. The next item is our fiscal year 24 budget hearing. We're encouraging everyone to come out to learn more about our budget, how we make budget decisions, learning about the priorities for the year, and that will take place on Wednesday, May 24th, 6:00 p.m., right here in the boardroom. And then finally, the best part, our student highlights. We always want to make sure that as we are making announcements, as we're talking about what's going on, that we're acknowledging our students. I see some staff members in the back that had some fist pumps. They were excited about seeing their students. We're incredibly proud of the hard work and success our students have achieved this year. I'm a strong believer in recognizing excellence. So I want to share some of these impressive accomplishments from our students during the past weeks. Our Central High School robotics team has been an extraordinary success, having been to nationals and ranking in the top 3 in the bi-state area. The Kansas City Chiefs have been a strong supporter of this program, with safety Justin Reed donating $15,000 to our robotics team. So we're super proud of Central and their robotics team and the work that they've done. Also, our own JAG program, and that JAG stands for Jobs for America's Graduates. That team of students competed at state and then flew to Orlando, Florida, where they won nationals for their project-based learning showcase, in which they created a mini working economy. Also, Lincoln Prep, our students competed against 47 other schools in math relays this spring. That's hundreds of students. Lincoln Prep had 10 different students finish in the top 10 in their respective categories. Also, just this past week, Northeast High School had 61 students inducted into the National Honor Society. That's amazing. They also had 5 business students qualify for state, and every student in their business leadership programs have maintained a GPA over 3.0. And then Paseo Academy of Fine and Performing Arts. Not only did they have 3 music students perform at the State Solo Festival at Mizzou, 2 of them won gold medals and 1 student won silver. Magali Marquez won gold for clarinet, while Kiki Rhodes won gold for vocals, and Brock Norland won silver for trumpet. Again, I want to say how extremely proud that we are of our students, their accomplishments and successes. And I want to say that I'm equally proud of our teachers and staff who work with our students each day. Just a reminder, this is Teacher and Staff Appreciation Week, and we just want to continue to acknowledge and to praise the hard work and the dedication of our teachers who serve our students daily. Our teachers are committed to this work, and they are committed to ensuring that our students are successful, and we can't thank them enough. And those are my announcements for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Collier. The chair recognizes Dr. Collier for the Summer Academy update.
For a moment there, I sort of felt like a news broadcaster. I don't know, might have a second career there. Okay. At this time, we will have our Summer Academy update, and this will be provided by Lori Peters, who is our Summer Academy coordinator.
Madam Chair, board members, Superintendent Dr. Collier, good evening. I am Lori Peters, the Summer Academy Coordinator. And our Summer Academy mission is to support the success of the Kansas City Public School students through enrichment, remediation, and community partnerships, while our vision is to provide a high-quality, diversified summer experience where both our students and our staff are able to learn and grow. And this summer, our Summer Academy will run June 5th through the 29th, which is 18 days of enrichment. Our registration goal was 4,000, to register 4,000 of our students, and we exceeded that goal. We have 4,440 students enrolled. Our teacher needs, we have 207 teachers is our goal currently. We have 147 currently staffed, while we are still actively recruiting and hiring to support our Summer Academy program. Our Summer Academy will serve the current KCPS students, along with our students who are entering the district this upcoming school year, and then also the students of our KCPS staff. And also we will also have our summer partners. The last day for Summer Academy registration was Monday, May 1st. And our students will be able to earn an attendance incentive. It's going to be the $100 attendance incentive for 1 or no days missed. And our summer graduation is planned for July 6th, which is on a Thursday at Manual at 11 a.m. Our Summer Academy community partners this year is the Boys and Girls Club, Alvin Ailey, and Emmanuel Family and Childhood Center. Our summer sites for elementary are listed. We have 8 sites. Our middle school will be Northeast Middle, and our high school will be Northeast High School, Lincoln College Prep at Lincoln Middle, and then also our Career Tech Ed program at Manual. Our elementary schedule for our elementary students will be from 9 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. And then our secondary schedule for our middle and high school students will be 8 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Our teachers will have a 7.5-hour work day, and our students will have a school day of 6.5 hours. With the elementary and the middle school curriculum, their curriculum will consist of our service learning projects, and we do have them listed there, K through 8. We will also use our pre and post test assessments through Eliminate, where we are measuring the student growth during the summer. We will also be implementing the Beyond the Four Walls field trip opportunities for the K through 8. That will be experiences that will take place around the Kansas City area. And then in addition, with KCPS, our clinicians will be also providing the social emotional learning lessons that align with the curriculum. Sorry. We may need batteries. There we go. Our high school curriculum, with high school, it will be instructor-led instruction or digital curriculum. And for our students who are in need of credit recovery, they will be utilizing the Edgenuity online platform. And this will allow students to earn up to 1 full credit, the student can enroll up to 2 credits to recover. For students who are registering for Summer Academy for attainment, they are able to earn half a credit. Then they have the option of either utilizing Edgenuity online platform or having that instructor-led instruction during that time. And then also they're able to earn that half a credit for attainment due to the seat time that's required for the attainment of that half a credit. All right. With our manual CTE program, currently we are going to be serving 43 students at manual, and it is broken down through their home high school where those students are deriving from and their grades. We're going to be serving 9th through 12th graders. And with that, the students will have an orientation tomorrow and Friday, and they are foreseeing an increase in that count once orientation for those students begin. Okay, there we go. Along with that, manual will have internship experiences for those students, which consist of Spire, Turner Construction, and Garmin. They'll be exposed to a financial literacy course, have college campus visits, and then some skill builders, which will include resume building, college applications, and then some job applications. So learning those skills. Oh, it's going backwards now. Okay. Our professional learning will be held May 31st through June 2nd. And on Wednesday, May 31st, it will be held district-wide at Manual. June 1st, it will be at the building site levels. And then on Friday, June 2nd, it is a teacher work day. So the teachers will be preparing their rooms that day. For our teachers will be receiving their daily rate of pay. They will also be able, the teachers and classified staff are able to earn an attendance incentive. And the Summer Academy sites will also be staffed with 2 substitute teachers at all sites. And review on our registration. Our registration window opened January 16th, and then once again, it did close on May 1st. Our parents registered via the Infinite Campus Google registration. This is a copy of what our registration flyers that were sent out to principals and our district counselors, what it looked like. And currently we are still in our campaign. Our registration campaign consisted of an aggressive talking points push, emails to families. This week, an email will be sent out. It's broken down where it's advising our families of the transportation information to be on the lookout of the week of May 15th. You're going to be receiving information from transportation. Also, it's reminding families if you're in the need of registering for Link, don't forget to do that. And then you'll see the upcoming dates leading up until Summer Academy, just so it's always on the forefront of our families' minds that we are going to be very excited to see you. So we do have some next steps that we're going to continue to work on. One, it is the continuation of the campaign to our registered families for Summer Academy. Also scheduling the students in Infinite Campus to make sure their schedules are built. Routing students for transportation. And then also making sure that our parent, teacher, and student feedback surveys are ready to be sent out the week of June 26th, so we can gain the parent, student, and teacher feedback. So we can review that information, so when we come back in August, we can present those findings. Thank you. And what questions?
Ms. Peters, thank you for the presentation. I'm just going to scan my colleagues here to see if anybody has any questions. Mr. Jackway, any questions? Ms. Curls?
Yeah, so I saw that you all exceeded your goal for registrations. Is the 207 as far as teacher needs, is that based on the adjusted goal? Or the adjusted actual registrations? And then how confident do you feel that you'll be able to reach that, the teacher goal?
The 207 is based off of the 4,000. We do have parents who are reaching out who have shared that they are possibly not utilizing Summer Academy. So, but to answer your question, it has not been adjusted, but I have worked with the building principals just this morning, and we are looking at their FTEs so we can request that through HR to add those FTEs to their building count. And how confident am I that we're going to get those teachers? We are actually actively recruiting and hiring, so we are reaching out to those current. Oh, I'm sorry, Jordan.
No, I'll just share one other point.
Okay.
So I got an update yesterday regarding our staffing for summer school. We're about 86% fully staffed to that 207 number. So that our numbers continually increase as teachers become aware of the incentive. We're starting to see more interest in summer school. So fairly confident that we'll meet that goal by the start of summer school.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Ford?
Basic question, how are the sites for summer school determined? How do we, identify which buildings are used and not? Which
The
programs?
buildings are, we started our planning very early this year in mid-September on those sites, working with building and maintenance, and it's actually on a rotation. And so that is, we looked at what buildings had construction going on this year, what buildings we used last year. So it's on a rotation list.
And then from a credit recovery standpoint, I know that's one of the objectives of summer school, to support students that need that. Is there anything that we're doing or have done kind of above and beyond to ensure that the students who need to be there from a credit recovery standpoint are there?
So we have worked with our counselors to ensure that they are able to pull the list or the students who are actually in need of credit recovery and that are on those tiered lists, to make sure, and pulling in their families and having those conversations to get them there. So we are doing our part to make sure that those students, you need Summer Academy and getting them there.
So I just wanted to express my gratitude to you for the communications strategy piece that goes with this, because I know that historically we have had a lot of, a big number that becomes a much smaller number once we actually get to the enrollment stage. So I think anything that continues to, I know parents have a lot of options and they're kind of picking all of them and then finalizing, but I appreciate kind of the persistence of the plan. So thank you for doing that. Yes, Ms. Kendricks.
So I have a question related to the outreach or the recruitment of those students who need the summer school. When I was teaching in KCPS, I remember that we would send out letters to parents of students who were failing in a subject, and then tell the parents that the student could receive a passing grade if they attended summer school and performed well. Did we still do that this year? Is that a practice we continue?
So we push on the counselors to reach out to those families whose students are failing, especially like a core class. And we wanted to do our best to ensure that they had the opportunity to come to Summer Academy. But overall, it's up to those families. But we did encourage our counselors to ensure that they did make that contact with those families and also to, you know, make sure the students know this is where you're at, especially our high school students, and how it all kind of how it does evolve into their graduation plan.
So did we give them the incentive of, if you attend summer school and you do well, that you would not have to be retained for failing classes?
Are you speaking like elementary, middle, or high school? So because
I taught in elementary, and so that's where the letters were sent out to parents in
Okay.
advance. I'm not sure about middle school and high school because I never taught there, so I was just wondering if that's a practice we're continuing or if we stopped that.
okay, yes.
So at the high school level, we utilize summer school for credit recovery for our students. So when our students are failing, they are able to earn credit. At the middle and elementary level, students don't earn credits. So they actually, summer school wouldn't help them as far as recovering a grade because they don't earn credits in those respects. But we do have what I think you might be referring to is like our Senate Bill 319 students. They were able to come to summer school and then not be retained. But under the new laws, some things have changed around that. And so we don't necessarily have to retain students the same way that we used to. But we do still encourage our students who are failing to come to summer school, and we still do have the opportunity for students who are failing to come and be promoted if they're able to show that they have made mastery in the areas that they need to. But at the elementary and middle school levels, those are on case-by-case basis. It's not something that we could blanketly say that we would do as a practice.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Peters. At this time, we're going to go ahead and move into our Equity Policy 0.0 presentation, and I'm going to ask Dr. Davis if he would come forward and begin this portion of the presentation. And then following this, we will move into the curriculum audit response.
Oh, thank you. Good evening, Superintendent Collier, Board Chair Cortez, members of the board and audience. I stand before you this evening to provide an update on our Board Policy 0.0, which is our overarching policy, our equity policy. So as we go into a relevant policy, I do want to mention this resolution that was a precursor to 0.0. This was a resolution that was adopted by the board in 2016. This was in the aftermath of some local incidents involving hate speech and hateful acts directed toward Muslims in our community. And we wanted to take a stand against any sort of hate speech or harm directed toward Muslims, especially in the aftermath of 9/11. So the resolution adopted by the board, you can see the screenshot there. There are far too many whereas statements to place them all here on the slide, but you can see that in this resolution, it was deemed by the board that it is the responsibility of our schools to educate students about the social, cultural, and ethnic diversity of the U.S. and those various religious and cultural traditions within our schools. And then, therefore, be it resolved that KCPS commits itself to instituting school policies and setting a culture responsive curriculum as well as training of staff and teachers. This was the precursor which then led to additional work that led to the adoption of Board Policy 0.0 by the school board just 2 years later. And you can see that in the last paragraph of Board Policy 0.0, it states that toward this end, the board will hold itself and all KCPS staff accountable for building a culture of equity at all levels of our district in order to meet our responsibilities to the entirety of the students we serve. Therefore, in policy, it is stated that it is the responsibility of all staff, all 1,800 employees, including 1,100 teachers, as well as our many administrators. Every single employee has a responsibility to conduct their work through an equity lens. Just a couple of years ago, the board also adopted our land acknowledgement statement, where we are committing ourselves to to making sure we're sharing stories of those who are typically silenced in the curriculum, more especially those indigenous peoples in our city and throughout our nation. And then earlier this year, the board adopted our new mission statement, upholding the promise of an equitable educational experience so Kansas City students thrive socially, emotionally, and academically. You can see through these various policy adoptions that our work did not start on yesterday. It has been continuing to evolve over the past 5 to 7 years. So as we begin to take a deeper look into Policy 0.0 and recall that it said it is the responsibility of our entire organization to build a culture of equity at all levels. So what does that look like? It really looks like equity in every department every day, where we are leading through an equity lens across all of the departments that you see listed on the slide and every department throughout our organization that could not fit on the slide. You do see some highlights on there. Those highlights are simply some that I wanted to speak on this evening. So our professional learning office, you'll see throughout the presentation where that office is really taking the lead on our culturally responsive book study and other culture responsive practices. This is a part of our 5 Big Rocks, and so our PD office is taking the lead on that through human resources, infusing equity-focused interview questions in every interview that we're bringing on, especially for executive leaders and principals. We're also bringing in those questions for all staff at the teacher level to ensure that we are measuring someone's cultural readiness to come in and provide that very needed support throughout our school system. Looking at our discipline data, you will see some of that throughout this evening. Equity through student support in our goal to be a trauma-informed district. It is in every department, in every day, and we are seeing the fruits of that over the past 5 years. So as we look at how do we define equity in our district, we break it up into the 4 constructs that you see. Equity is about access. Availability is not the same as accessibility. Does every student have access into all the programs that we offer so that they can benefit from those programs? Representation, in what ways are we being equitable in the pursuit of equity? Are we inviting individuals to be at the table to give their input? This is presence in decision making. We're talking students, families, and staff. That's representation. Not just having people in the room to just check off a box that we had diverse representation, but is everyone able to participate meaningfully in that process? That's that inclusion piece. And then ultimately, equity is about high outcomes for all. And so we'll get a chance to see how we are utilizing our equity audits and really breaking down our data to look at subgroup achievement to see if everyone is benefiting from our instruction, from our programs and processes. So as we continue to look at history and previous context, when we first launched the equity efforts in response to the adoption of Policy 0.0, one of the first steps was to create an equity steering committee. This was a committee that was made up of very diverse stakeholders, not only diverse in their position throughout the district. We had building level staff, central office staff, making sure multiple departments were represented, but then also those identity markers. We ensured that we had teachers, administrators, we had various ethnicities on their genders, but then also we also had parents and community members as part of the equity steering committee, and it has continued to grow since then. Also, one of the early initiatives was to institute implicit bias training for all new employees. So for the past 3, maybe going on probably 4 years now, we have instituted implicit bias training. 4 years, we have instituted implicit bias training for everyone coming into our organization. And you can see a couple of screenshots of Twitter posts where we do have staff who appreciate coming into an organization where this is a value. We essentially are expanding the number of people who are responsible for the implementation of equity initiatives. There's far too many strategies and initiatives that have gone on over the past few years, but you can see some of those listed on the slide. In response to the implicit bias training, we do provide an opportunity on the last slide after our 2.5-hour workshop is for staff to take a few more minutes to let us know some of their key takeaways. You can see the questions that are asked in that, and by and large, the consensus is that the learning objectives are clear and that they learn through the process. All right, so also we stated that equity touches everything. It's in every department. So equity is really a part of all of the goals and measures that we have throughout KCPS. And so because 0.0 is the overarching policy, you will actually hear equity in every update. So every policy update that you hear, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, other policy monitoring presentations, you will hear equity infused in those presentations as well. So this is the broad to let you know what we're doing district-wide, but it is in detail you will hear in every report that we give, especially as it relates to a policy monitoring. And you should hear it in all presentations. So as we look at just a sampling of some of our goals, these are taken from Blueprint 2030, 50% of KCPS third graders reading at or above grade level. This is measured by our iReady scores, and you receive ample updates on that. Also looking at our proportional attendance, monitoring who's not coming to school. We want every student to be at school at least 90% of the time. This is a Missouri standard. And then also looking at the fruits of becoming a trauma-informed school district. Some of the KPIs that were shared when we went through that presentation was monitoring the reduction of suspensions throughout our system, and then also monitoring our four-year graduation rate. Even though we know we have students who graduate at the 4.5-year mark, 5-year mark, 6-year mark, we are wanting to increase each year the number of students who are able to complete within the 4-year time frame. So as we look at those goals, these are some of the KPIs that we're monitoring, the data that we monitor to see if we're on track to achieve those goals. And through equity, we will always break down our data by subgroup. And so you'll see on each of these next 4 slides, the district-wide data on the left, but then when we unpack that and disaggregate that data by subgroup, you can see more clearly who's doing well within each of these categories and then who's not benefiting from the way things are. And so currently, as we seek to grow the cumulative total, the overall percent of third graders reading at or above grade level, as we break this down, we do see that, for example, white males in our district, 72% of them are reading at or above grade level in third grade, compared to 25% of black males in the same grade. As we begin to look at our chronic absenteeism data, and remember, chronic absenteeism is defined by missing 10% or more of school days. So let's say if we had 170 days of school, someone who ended the year in the chronic absence category, they missed at least 17 days of school. So we want that chronic absenteeism number to be really low. We know that we do have students who are experiencing life challenges since COVID especially, and that number has risen. However, when we break that down by subgroup, we see that the same subgroup that had the lowest rates of proficiency in third grade reading also has the highest rates of chronic absenteeism in our district. And then we can see also those who had the highest rates of reading proficiency at third grade also has the lowest rate of chronic absenteeism. So we can begin to see some correlation as we begin to look at all of our data. Again, this is just a sampling of the data that we monitor through our equity steering committee. It's a lot of data that we monitor. So as we look at suspension data, you can see that overall our percent of students who have received one or more suspensions has dropped in recent years. And when we gave this report a couple of years ago, African American boys were, this is the national average, were suspended at a rate of 4 to 1 when compared with white boys. In our state, there was a report, you probably saw that in the KC Star, that Missouri had the highest rate of suspensions of black boys or black students in general in the nation. That's not a stat we want to be first in. And when we pulled our data, unfortunately, our data mirrored the state average and the national average of rate of 4 to 1. So as we look at our suspension data to see that we have reduced all suspensions over the last several years, and we will continue to drop that every single year, what we are happy to see is that our intentionality and focus around some of our policy changes and practice changes, that rate is now dropped to a rate of 2 to 1. It's still not where we want it to be. We still have a disparity, but you see that that rate is now at 2 to 1 in our district. So we are closing some of those gaps. But what I also want to point out is that, again, the same group that experienced the lowest rates of reading proficiency at 3rd grade and the highest rates of chronic absenteeism also is experiencing the highest rate of suspension within our district. So as we begin to make those correlations, what is this telling us? That if students are being suspended at a higher rate, that means that some of those absences aren't simply students staying out of school, at home playing Nintendo or whatever game system kids play today, or hiding behind a bleacher. Some of the students are not at school because they were told they could not be at school that day by way of suspension. And then, so if suspensions are higher, if attendance is lower, then all of us would perform higher on an exam if we were present to hear the instruction. So we know that there are some correlations between all of these metrics, and this is why we have to monitor all of our data, not only to know where students are, but also to evaluate our strategies as to, are they effective? Are things trending in the right way? And if not, we need to come up with new strategies. And then the fourth and final KPI for this evening, sometimes you'll see that through these equity updates, we bring other data just so that we show you that we're monitoring across a large spectrum of data. So our graduation rates are increasing. And when we look at the 4-year graduation rate data, first before I kind of talk about what you're seeing there, I do want, this is for the public, that when you see our 4-year graduation rate data, it does not mean if you take that number and you subtract it from 100 that is our dropout rate. Sometimes I hear in the community that, nearly 30% of KCPS students are dropping out, and I said, well, where did you get that? Oh, we saw your graduation rate data. So that's not the same thing. As long as students are actively enrolled and working toward that, it doesn't mean that this is simply our 4-year graduation rate data. And we do have students who graduate the 5-year mark, the 6-year mark. But as we look at this particular data, and we recall our subgroup, white males who were doing well academically in the early years, have the highest rates of attendance and lowest rates of suspension. But when we look at our 4-year graduation rate data, they are lagging behind. And so we do have to unpack that and dig in. So as we talk about data, and is that 18 minutes? You got to be kidding. Okay, I asked my colleague to set an 18-minute mark so I know when I have my I can't believe this. Let me, I'm going to need about 7 more minutes. Let me make this quick. Okay. All right, moving on. We also collect our staff survey data. Ignore all these chuckles and laughs over here from my colleagues. So as we look at our staff survey data that we sent out just a couple of years ago, where staff were asked how much they agree or disagree with the following statements. And you can see that top one that is highlighted for you. That adults at my school understand students' experiences and backgrounds. The gray bar is all staff. The lighter green is white staff, and the top bar, the darker green, is non-white staff. And we can see on average, only 60% of our school-based staff thought that was a true statement. that is what led us to conversations around we have to be very intentional about building capacity around being culturally responsive. This is an outcome of this survey. And when you look at that bottom one, that adults in my school care about and support students beyond schoolwork, it's interesting that on average, 83% of our school staff thought that was a true statement. But when you break it down by teachers of color and non-teachers of color, there's a huge disparity in how they define that. And so we have to further unpack that to look at how are we defining support. It's being looked at and monitored and evaluated in different ways with different perspectives. We also administer student survey data. You can see this was administered last year, and then we have this same survey that's currently out right now. I believe it may have just recently closed, so we can see our trend data. But last year, when high school students were asked, do they feel unsafe because of their gender, 0% of male students at the high school level felt that was a true statement. But 100% of transgender students said that they feel unsafe because of their gender. So we have, in response to this, we've trained our directors, our principals, on creating inclusive spaces for LGBTQ youth. We're leading trainings so that every staff member understands our non-gender conforming policy. Also, we asked students last year, how often have they been verbally harassed at their school because of their race or ethnicity? One of the options was never. And so we didn't place that on there. So what you see here are those who stated that it does happen. So for example, you can see that only 24% of black students in our high schools felt that they do experience any sort of harassment. But we see that 57% of Asian students felt that they have received harassment. You can see the largest bulk of that 57%, they are marking rarely. And then the other portion is sometimes, but you can see that the subgroup that is experiencing the highest rates of feeling othered was our Asian student population. You can also see South Asians at 33%, which is what led us to, we always knew we were going to start and launch affinity groups this year, but because of this data, that's why we started with our Asian affinity groups. And we have launched that at Lincoln Prep and Lincoln Middle. We will continue to launch more student affinity groups in the future. Let me just quickly go through here. Okay, courageous conversations across the board. This is the PD that we've experienced just this year, led from our CIPD department, culture responsive. In fact, I just do want to point out that third bullet from Dr. David Kirkland. He is here with us this evening, and you will hear from him next. Hopefully he is a little bit shorter winded than I am. We are currently in the process of I'll say editing or responding to the focus groups that we've had. So we were able to draft our culture responsive and sustaining education plan. The board received a copy of that in April. We have since had focus group sessions. I'm going to speed through here. Our plan is broken up into 4 strategic commitments, similar to how Blueprint 2030 is broken up into 4 strategic commitments. You'll see these are defined here, but we're going to kind of skip through it. I will say that in August, when I come back for the August equity update, we will spend that entire presentation solely on the culture responsive and sustaining education plan. That will be the only topic for that update. We hope to have a workshop between now and then so we can really go through the document the way we did with Blueprint 2030. Our focus groups were facilitated by Sophic Solutions. We also held focus groups with students from all high schools, including Success Academy. We had a lot of representation from community partners, Center for Conflict Resolution, Hispanic Chamber, Link, Latinx, Education Collaborative, Teachers Like Me, and Block. We also have collected quite a bit of feedback. That feedback has been lumped into buckets or themes that appeared most often. You'll see a copy of the report in your binder that has more of that feedback, and we'll be able to go through that in more detail when we have our board workshop, and then we'll be able to share where we are in responding to the feedback that will make our plan a lot stronger. By and large, people like the draft plan, but we did get a lot of great feedback in order to improve that. So ultimately, as we close out, what are we doing? This is intentional, but incremental, coordinated shifts. Shifts in mindsets, shifts in behaviors, shifts in systems. We're tackling all of this simultaneously. There's a lot of work that's going on throughout our district toward advancing equity in every department, every day. It's putting one foot in front of the other. I can tell that where we are today, we are a far more equitable school system than where we were 5 years ago. These shifts are not something that you can't turn it around in a day. However, we are seeing the fruits of their work and had to go through there kind of fast. These are just our challenges. That universities are not including culturally responsive training and educator prep programs. So we are having to bring folks in and really starting from scratch. We may have to see if we can partner with some of our more local universities to see if we can get that in there, but then also finding time to train more teachers as equity champions. We spend a lot of time with principals, but we know that principals need thought partners, they need a team, they need teachers, and so we do want to find space for 2 teachers to come out, 2 to 3 for each building, so that now there's a team leading the equity within the building and not just on that leader. And we know we have a lot of teachers who will look forward to joining us in this endeavor. Next steps, in June we will begin planning our response to the culturally responsive audit findings that we will hear this evening from Dr. Kirkland. In August, we will have Zaretta Hammond here to provide a keynote presentation for the KCPS staff. This is in response, culminating activity to our year-long book study. As stated before, in August, we will have our update focused solely on CRSC, and then we hope to bring a final plan after we've responded and made our edits based on our feedback to the board for adoption in November, and then we'll add that to the earlier slide as another component that the board has adopted in our pursuit of equity. And now I'll open it up for your 2 to 3 questions.
So Dr. Davis, on that point, I think what I'm going to encourage my colleagues to think about is kind of a 2-tier, right? If you have 1 or 2 questions that you want to ask this evening, great. Keep track of the other ones, send them to our board secretary, and I think that could form the foundation of the dialogue in the workshop setting.
Yes.
And allow us to go deeper on some of those questions. So otherwise, yeah, I think we could ask lots of questions and be here for quite a while. Ms. Curls, I'm going to start with you.
Just a real quick question. So with the plan, I guess I'm kind of thinking of that as like a strategic plan.
Yes.
So what's the timeline for kind of those 4 things we're hoping to achieve? I mean, I see this timeline, but for the plan, this is to adopt the plan. Once we have a plan, what's the timeline for that to be executed?
Yes, so the execution of that plan will begin immediately on next year. And so when we have a chance to go through our workshop, we'll be able to share the priority strategies. If you've had a chance to peek through there, you'll see a lot of strategies for every group. Students, principals, community board have strategies. District office will actually be able to block out several hours to go through that in detail, and we'll be able to answer that question as to how we'll roll this out to where we'll see consistency. We have to start somewhere, and then what we don't want is we don't want teachers in this building where we're going to start with these 5 and someone in another classroom going to start with this 5, or in another school, and now there's inconsistency in what we will see. So we're going to, based on the feedback we receive, so I'm sharing this as part of the feedback that came through the process, so that as we roll it out, it's clear that these are the priority strategies that we want to see everywhere. We will also build capacity in teachers and principals in order to implement those strategies.
Ms. Ford? Ms. Kendricks?
As usual, I have a lot, but I'm going to give you a break and save them for the workshop.
Okay, all righty.
Mr. Jackaway?
I have a lot, but y'all aren't asking questions, so I'll take all of your time and just ask. No, I'm just playing. I'm not going to ask all of them. A couple questions and then I'll save the rest for the workshop. You spent some time on slide 39 talking through the suspension data, which I think is critical, the work that we're doing around that. I'm curious if you could just share practically what are some of the things that we've found to be effective strategically in mitigating that discrepancy, moving it from 4-to-1 to 2-to-1, and that we also think is going to continue to move us towards greater equity there?
Oh, that's a great question, and absolutely, I would say that it's probably 10 things, but I'll give 3 just off the top. One is the implicit bias training, is really being aware of our bias. So the data was showing that students were in some groups were being suspended at a higher rate, even for minor infractions. So how are we viewing those infractions? And we needed to challenge people on that. And so the implicit bias training that we've done over the last 4 years has really helped for people to understand, am I responding in a different way with this student than I would in any other situation, and really take time to think about that and not have suspension as a default response to student infraction. Secondly, I would say it's the work that our student support division has been leading around making sure that all teachers are trained in the discipline that restores as part of our restorative practices is also one of our 5 big rocks. And then thirdly, I would say, is our policy change. So a couple of years ago, the board adopted a new and different student code of conduct where we are eliminating suspensions at the K-5 level. And what we're now doing with that policy change is looking to see where we have gaps. Have we provided the resources that would help schools to actually be able to do that? And what we found is that not every school has an ISS room, for example. Not every school has a restorative justice coordinator. So those are some of the things that we'll continue to look at to make sure that we're not only have these high expectations, that we're also providing high support. But those would be 3. And there's no silver bullet, but it's a lot of strategies working together to result in this change.
Thank you very much. One other question. On the KPIs, the staff survey data, am I understanding that is self-reported, their perspective there on slide 41?
Yes, these are the responses from staff. So they identified as non-white or multiracial or white. And then these are also how they answered those questions. And it was anonymous, so we don't know who they are. So this is a self-report, and it was voluntary.
So it seems, if I'm, again, looking at this correctly, those who identify as white seem to rank themselves really highly there. I'm curious if you feel like that actually aligns with your experience in leading in the district, or is there perhaps some bias that is also being shown that they're giving maybe themselves as they're reporting this?
First, I want to validate the perspective of those who gave us this information so that we can pour through it and then begin to make some initial steps as to how do we respond to what staff are telling us to then use it to make our buildings more culture responsive for the students we serve. But what I see in this is that when the question is, staff in my school care about and support students beyond schoolwork, someone may feel like, are you seeing how the student's weekend is? Do you know what their lived experience is at home? Are you seeing to their personal needs? There are some staff who may see that support looks like, are you eating? If not, let me connect you to a resource. I've been through several schools where students on Friday, before they go home, they come in and they grab a backpack filled with food and they take it home, and then on Monday they bring it back to the school. They know that is available because someone in that school recognized that need. And so someone else may feel like if I'm checking work at night, I'm supporting them. I come back and provide feedback. So we just want to have further conversation to then ask a deeper question: what does support and care look like, so that we can then begin to understand how people define that, and then we can have a holistic conversation around what are the needs of our students, and we then need to meet that need more effectively. And so we'll continue to use this conversation to then monitor that data, because we're going to ask these same questions again, and we'll see if it's changed because of all of the training we've done as well.
I'm going to just ask a couple of quick questions. One, actually on that slide that you were just on of the survey, do we ask those same survey questions of our students and our parents?
That's an excellent question. We do have the survey questions for a parent survey and a student survey. However, we have not done that as of yet. We wanted to roll it out with the staff because we felt like that would be the easiest way to start. However, we do have those other components for, and we will roll that out so we can see the student perspective. How would they answer if their teachers care about and support them beyond schoolwork? We do want to capture that, and we do have the questions. We just have not administered that. We had that student survey, which was around culture, climate, safety, belonging. We will continue again. We just closed that one, but we will administer the other survey that we have.
Is that something you anticipate in the next academic year, or?
We anticipate we can do it right after testing, and yes. And then next year we can add in our families as well. We have all three versions.
My last is really more of an existential question, right? One of the things we struggle with in KCPS is bringing new voices to the table. So when you set up your equity steering committee, and as you progress that group, how do you bring in voices that are not the ones who always show up at the table?
That is a great question. So as we begin to pour over our data, we can see who's not in the room. And so gradually over time, that group has grown. We've now added admissions into the mix. We have more parents in the mix. So we have signature school parents. We have neighborhood school parents. And so many folks who have expressed a desire, they've been added to the committee and they've been very productive. And then there are some others who, to use a term, voluntold, but we have to make sure that we have that perspective in the room. But they have come in and they are also championing that work. We have several data folks, so we have assessment. There's every department here has someone on it, and it just continues to grow. So we are inviting folks in. Some are asking, can they join? And then others, if we see we have a perspective we need in the conversation, we'll bring in that department as well. So it's getting large, but we need all of those diverse perspectives in order to inform change.
Thank you very much. I think with that, Dr. Collier, we'll move to the second part of the presentation.
Okay.
All right, at this time, I will allow Dr. Davis to introduce our speaker for the evening, and this is really looking at our curriculum. As we talk about being culturally responsive, and we're working to train staff and develop common understandings around what this means, we also felt like it was important to ensure that we have a culturally responsive curriculum. There's a lot of research around the importance of our children really feeling and seeing a reflection of themselves and their lives in that curriculum, in the books that they read, and just in the daily interactions with that curriculum. And so we took the time this year to engage an expert around this area to help support us and to really take a look at our curriculum. And so at this time, Dr. Davis, if you'd like to introduce our guest for the evening.
Yes, Dr. Collier. I'm so excited to introduce this evening Dr. David Kirkland. He is the founder and CEO of Forward ED. And Dr. Kirkland is an expert in this area. If Geneva Gay and Gloria Ladson Billings wrote the book on culture responsive, I would say Dr. Kirkland. He wrote the teacher's edition, the supplementary materials, any other guide. He is an expert. We were so excited to work with him, and we're excited to hear his findings on this evening. I'll also say he's not only been a champion at NYU over the last 17 years, but his work is being used across the country. So, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. David Kirkland with Forward ED.
Set a 15-minute timer for me. Good evening, Madam Chair, board members, and Superintendent Collier. It's my pleasure to be here to share our audit findings. First, I'm happy to present our assessment of the Kansas City Public Schools curriculum. The assessment was designed to answer two questions. To what extent is the Kansas City Public School curriculum culturally responsive and sustaining? And what are the effects of the implementation across the district? To help answer these questions, we leveraged a tiered mixed methods design using descriptive, statistical, and qualitative analyses to examine effects, and quantitative methods and measurements to assess content fidelity. Our analysis has allowed us to explore how and if the curriculum works, that is, its underlying framework or approach to human development. The logic of the curriculum was as follows. It followed a mediational model where there is an input, a mediator, an output, a moderator, followed by a set of outcomes. It begins with the idea that we have content fidelity, an actual culturally responsive sustaining curriculum that is implemented with fidelity where all students are maximally and equitably exposed. And we believe that this can cause or lead to at least three things: thriving and culturally proficient educators, more equitable and successful schools, and well-supported and loved and thriving youth. This assessment was designed to test this logic. To answer the first audit question, we conducted a comparative qualitative analysis of the Kansas City Public Schools curriculum by calculating a range of culturally responsive, sustaining educational coefficients for the district. These range from -1 to +1. If you wish to label the strength of a coefficient for absolute values of culturally responsive, sustaining education, we use the following to help us or to guide us. 0 to 0.19 would be regarded as very weak, 0.2 to 0.39 as weak, 0.4 to 0.59 as moderate, 0.6 to 0.79 as strong, and 0.8 to 1 as very strong. Statistically, we found the Kansas City Public Schools curriculum to be moderately to strongly culturally responsive and sustaining. This assessment was based on a CRSE coefficient of 0.685 derived as the mean of 19 subject area domains that were closely analyzed. This mean score was statistically significant at the 0.001 level and trended closer to a perfect CRSE score than to an adiaphorous one. Additionally, all CRSE coefficients calculated fell on the positive side of the CRSE coefficient scale. And we can see here the KCPS-ELA curriculum was in certain ways expressly culturally responsive, particularly within ELA, where scores tended to range at or above 0.7. The arts scored the highest with an overall CRSE coefficient for the fine arts curriculum at 0.863, with some subjects scoring close to perfect. STEM didn't score as well, however, with scores ranging between 0.5 and 0.6. So I want to highlight 4 trends. 1, work has been done in this district, particularly in ELA, around culturally responsive sustaining education. This is clear through our analysis. Trend 2, more work can be done across all subject areas, but specifically in relationship to STEM. 3, art can provide models for integration for where this work can go. And 4, work needs to be done in order to refine contradictions between traditional educational ideas or paradigms and a culturally responsive, sustaining education idea or paradigm. Two other things we noted were that the most highly rated curriculum did three things. One, it leveraged a multi-sensory experience. Two, it created room to reflect. And three, it centered students' agency and their opportunities to act upon and transform, their world. Since the arts curriculum scored, higher CRSE outcomes than the STEM curriculum did, we believe that the integration of the ideology that Kansas City Public Schools has embraced around integrating arts within STEM, what Kansas City Public Schools call STREAM, could be beneficial. In fact, we would argue that STEM can move from STEM to STEAM, but also to STREAM, with an integration as well and a focus on reading. So, there will be some rethinking work, but it won't be about an overhaul, but about a threading of the needle. This threading will involve a curriculum redesign that centers on the idea that students the district serves possess potential and possibilities that exist beyond themselves. It will also speak to the idea of how some students are valued and gain more value as they grow their world views. Finding 2. So we found that not all members of the Kansas City Public School community felt visible in the curriculum. In addition to the stats, we talked to over 300 people from across the district through focus groups and individual interviews. While the statistical data were able to help us evaluate the extent to which the curriculum was culturally responsive and sustaining, the qualitative data helped us to understand for whom it was culturally responsive and sustaining. Many members across the Kansas City Public Schools community described their presence as an absence. Groups saw their identities present in the district but absent from their school experience. Let me explain. Black and brown students, for example, often felt misrepresented or underrepresented, even though they comprised approximately 82% of the student population. They also felt that the intense racial mismatch between them and their teachers, as only 31% of the district teachers identified as black or brown, was an issue. One community member described the lack of BIPOC representation within the teaching staff. Another community member said, "There are not many black male teachers at my school." According to another community member, there should be more programs offered for the Latinx community. Other student groups, such as Asian students, felt left out, with one community member saying, Asian Americans have been forgotten. That in quotes. Another community member, said, "I never see Asian people in the curriculum materials." Muslim students also felt completely deleted, with one member expressing concern and another member mentioning a presence of subtle discrimination against students like me who wear or who are in a hijab. Some students with disabilities felt the curriculum was non-responsive to their needs. One student said, "We can do better with our efforts to reach our students with disabilities in the curriculum." But I want to reiterate and make this point clear. The general student feeling was of welcome. A student added, "Kansas City Public Schools has established itself as a respected, safe space for a lot of people. I'm extremely satisfied with my experience in this district." Still, we should pay attention to those voices who felt the curriculum wasn't fully designed to respond to or sustain them. Their remarks suggest that at one level, what it means to be present and unseen, and at an entirely different level, what it means to be ignored, though unseen. The more an identity moved away from the dominant ideal, no matter how present that identity was across the curriculum, it would be absent in the Kansas City Public Schools institutions, including the curriculum and the teacher workforce. Our third finding was that the CRE curriculum was not evenly implemented across the district because of a hidden curriculum that was equally at work with the express curriculum. Hidden curriculum can be seen in attendance, where the attendance rate for Black students, for example, was about 58.6%, according to the data we received. The hidden curriculum was expressed in things like lost instruction, where Black students lost approximately 41% of overall instructional time, meaning they lost access to a significant percentage of the curriculum. So even if the curriculum was culturally responsive and sustaining due to challenges with attendance, students across the district lacked full access to it. Because the attendance challenge was most acute in the secondary grades, particularly in high school, the culturally responsive sustaining efforts were rendered less effective than they could have been, as students had fewer opportunities to take advantage of them. Another aspect of the hidden curriculum was segregated schooling, where Black students make up about 53.7% of the overall student population. We had in some schools Black students making up as much as 92% of the student population. And this held true across student groups. And the final aspect of the hidden curriculum was in how money was spent. These spending data are important because they speak to how the curriculum is supported, and the more support tends to mean the better the implementation and the higher the quality of the experience of the curriculum. This is what we found. Teacher salaries range between $2,428.22 to $5,452.70 per school, per pupil. We found that spending on school-level community services was perhaps the most uneven of the expenditures we examined. Spending on school-level community services ranged from $1.63 per pupil at Southeast High School to $2,818.88 per pupil at Harold Holliday Senior Montessori. Spending on informational technology seemed fair, with each school spending about $820.40 per pupil. However, patterns of fairness did not hold in terms of building maintenance expenditures with per school spending ranging from $1,101.31 to $2,664.51 per pupil. So, let's revisit the logic and zoom in on this area. This area right here. I just hit the 15-minute mark. I'll be quick. I'm almost done. What we see is that there is some content fidelity with work to do. We see that the curriculum is implemented, when it's implemented, could be implemented with fidelity, but there are questions about implementation raised by community members and the hidden curriculum. And in the hidden curriculum, there are questions of whether students were maximally and equitably exposed. We call this a level 1 error. And what a level 1 error is that there is an issue with the input. What's being inputted, i.e. content fidelity, how it's being implemented or inputted, implementation, and the extent to which it is inputted or exposure. So, I'm about to close. What does a level 1 error tell us about the Kansas City Public Schools paradigm or curriculum? 1, it tells us that while Kansas City Public Schools blends elements of culturally responsive, sustaining education throughout the student experience, there is some significant variation between subject domains, within subject domains, and across the district overall. This level 1 error tells us that infidelity to a pure culturally responsive, sustaining education model is evident across all data streams. Thus, it is difficult to describe the entire district as culturally responsive and sustaining as the fundamental or as culturally responsive, sustaining education may not be the fundamental driving aspect of the curriculum. It tells us that there is a clear emergence of this idea of culturally responsive, sustaining education, and that these elements all shift toward the emergence of a culturally responsive, sustaining education curriculum. It also tells us about a set of tensions. Tensions between desire and delivery, between diversity and representation, between the identity of students and the identity of teachers, between access and opportunity, between instruction gained and instruction lost, between the hidden curriculum and the express curriculum, between who's present in the curriculum and who's absent from it. So, what do we do? And how do we get to where we want to go? 3 basic recommendations. A conversation about the curriculum and all curriculum domains around equity and culturally responsive, sustaining education. 2, establish and maintain some office dedicated to creating a culturally responsive, sustaining education with input fidelity and monitoring outcomes or output fidelity, as we believe culturally responsive, sustaining education leads to the desired outcomes that the district wants. And 3, to develop policies to treat the root causes of the input inequities, centering culturally responsive, sustaining education as the overarching framework. The immediate next steps will be more and better data. This simply means that the district should use better and more data, disaggregated and strengths data, as Dr. Davis has pointed out. Create or adopt systems for sharing and linking data across the curriculum, including curriculum scoring, and create a Kansas City Public Schools data dashboard to highlight key performance indicators with easy-to-use, up-to-date display. The system and indicators we suggest are highlighted in the main report along with other key examples of the recommendations given. And with that, I thank you all for your time.
Thank you very much for walking us through that. That was a pretty dense deck. So thank you for expediting our experience through that. I'm going to invite my colleagues. I can't remember where I started last time. Mr. Jackaway, questions?
I've got a bunch of questions, but I'm not going to ask them at this time. There's a bunch in here that I want to kind of work through, and I'm excited for our workshop.
Ms. Kendricks.
I always have a lot of questions. I'm not going to ask those questions. Now, I do want to make a comment, though. One of the things I appreciate about your presentation is how much data was there. The other thing I appreciate is at the end where we talk about our need to collect more data and to use it to inform what we are doing in the future. I think that is something that the district has been working on and has struggled with for a long time. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate the explanation that was given here. One of my concerns originally was that there was a recommendation to redo the entire curriculum again. And then listening to you, I'm understanding that threading the needle part, where we have a curriculum that meets a lot of what we need, but we still need to thread the needle and look at the data to understand how to do that better. So I just really appreciate everything in this presentation, and Dr. Davis will have to deal with a lot of questions in our workshop.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kendricks.
Ms. Ford.
One of the things that really stood out to me, well, a lot of it did, but you talked about the work needs to be done to refine the contradictions between traditional and anti-racist education. Can you elaborate a little bit more on like what that looks like in real life, in practice?
Yeah.
Because that's big. Yeah.
It simply means, some of the anti-bias work that has been done in the curriculum, not in the curriculum, but throughout the district, and really thinking about what culturally responsive sustaining education motto is. The question here is whether or not it's ancillary, it's something that you add on, or is it the through line? Is it the thread that connects and drives all curriculum? And if that's the case, the contradiction between, embracing traditional approaches, has to be, a conversation has to be had about that, right? And what does it mean to displace the traditional approaches with one that recognize the value and relevance of culture through to the learning experiences of all of our students? And what does that look like as it shows up in all curriculum areas? So what does it look like in math? What does it look like in STEM, right? In science. What does it look like, throughout? The contradiction comes when you look across, you see certain areas throughout the district that have not embraced culturally responsive sustaining education or a commitment to the students that show up in this district. As I look at it, at least 90% of the students in Kansas City Public Schools are non-white. What does that look like in science? What does it look like in math? What does it look like across the curriculum? How does that become foundation, not just an add-on or something that you use to dress up a curriculum with?
Question might be just to Dr. Collier, Dr. Davis, just how you're thinking about absorbing this information and what do our next steps look like from your viewpoint with the recommendations that were given?
Well, I think there's a lot there. I think we have to take the time to really synthesize this information and think about how do we share this with our larger community, because it can't just sit here at central office and the cabinet and executive team. How do we share this information and this data with our staff members? And then I think it's important that we include them in this process as we begin to thread that needle, making sure that they are coming along with us in those conversations. But also, I think accompanied with that is, as we move into next year, thinking about culturally responsive teaching. What does that look like operationalized? Like, how do I do this every day? And making sure we're clearly outlining what those strategies might look like in a classroom so that teachers know what to do, because they can read the book and they can hear the language, but I think sometimes people are wondering exactly what should I be doing? And so I think that's some of the work that our team has already started working on, but making sure we have clearly outlined as we go into next year so that they understand what this looks like in practice. Because you talked about it in the presentation about the express curriculum, because you can have a curriculum, but a lot is dependent upon the person who is delivering it too. So we have to think about that, how we are preparing our educators to deliver a culturally responsive curriculum in a culturally responsive manner. So this is challenging work because it's not just one component or one thing you have to think about. You have to think about many things at the same time in terms of really delivering a culturally responsive curriculum in a way that really honors and brings forth the absolute best in our students. So I hope I answered that. It's pretty complex, but I think we're ready to do this work. So
I love that.
Ms. Ford, any other questions?
It could be a follow-up. I'm wondering, and this could be a part of some of the future conversations that we have in the community, are there narratives that we can provide to some of these charts that show the teacher salaries and the spending in the buildings and the dollars that are being spent on certain programs? Are there narratives that we can kind of create and share, first with the board, but then definitely broadly, to explain why these numbers are what they are?
absolutely, because there are stories and narratives behind what the numbers are in some cases. And so we can definitely do that. But I think we also have to look at the places where we need to improve doing that too.
Yes.
But like, for example, and I'm not trying to justify anything, but I know, having been a Montessori principal, what the cost of actually running a true Montessori program requires. And so I know it's really challenging when people look at those numbers on paper because it does look very inequitable. But the question is, I know for when I was the leader of Border Star, I always thought about, if we're going to have a Montessori program, we really need to do it with fidelity. Otherwise, we shouldn't promote Montessori if that's not really what we're doing. And in order to deliver that, it costs. And that model does cost more than traditional education. So like, that would be something that we could help people understand. But at the same time, we still can look at places where we do need to improve and make some changes so that we are spending more equitably.
Ms. Curls?
So thank you again for this whole presentation. This is very enlightening and definitely have lots of questions. But one was just going to be, who's doing this well? Like, what district or what area of the country has culturally responsive and sustainable education? Because I assume, and I might be wrong in this, like, I'm assuming a lot of curriculum is just kind of purchased, and then we figure out how to, cater it to a particular school district. Is there something out there that's like ready for ready-made, or is this really something we have to create and develop for ourselves?
And there are a few answers to your question, Ms. Curls, and thank you for the question. The first answer, is look at yourselves. I think that there are things that Kansas City Public Schools, is doing amazingly well. In terms of the welcome centers, for example, I would love to see a welcome center in every school, so that every student feels welcome from, day one. I do think, some of the work around addressing issues with students from Islamic, background, and even some of the recent work around addressing the issues around Asian and Pacific Islander students, is important. There are some amazing things within the ELA curriculum. I think that you all are doing some things that has an express commitment to what the curriculum calls a culturally responsive, education. Also think that you all are doing a really good job, in the arts, specifically with dance and music, integrating youth and student culture, into that. And I think the career and technical education, especially as it, benefits, some of the young men of color, does a really good job. So I think that Kansas City Public Schools really has places that you can look at, really to integrate some of those promising practices and models. And some of those things have been shared in the report as well as in these slides. Other places around the country that's like Kansas City Public Schools that I think, do a pretty good job of, culturally responsive, sustaining education. We have some districts in New York City. For example, District 13 in New York City, they've done a lot in terms of restorative practice, trauma-informed care from a non-deficit perspective, integrating the needs of the community within schools. There's this Ball State University out of Ohio. They're doing some really interesting things with the school district there. And we're beginning to see the results within the data where we have attendance metrics going up, and I know attendance is a leading indicator as opposed to a lagging indicator, but now we're beginning to see the lag where academic achievement is going up. So that's one thing, but the other thing that's probably more important than, academic achievement going up, the students who attend those schools, they feel seen, they feel better, and they feel more efficacious from that experience. So those are a few places that I would look at, but I would say start here. Look at where, we're doing it well here, and try to integrate and connect, some of those successes across your curriculum.
Thank you for that. And one other, I'm hoping it'll be a quick question. We are in a fairly conservative state, even though our city is fairly liberal. And so a lot of things are happening at the state level to almost kind of combat what we're trying to do here. Do you have any recommendations or thoughts about how we can arm ourselves for those kind of fights that we're probably going to have to engage in, or conversations that we're going to have to engage in?
Yeah, Buckminster Fuller says if you want to change something, you don't try to change the existing model. You create an alternative model that makes the existing model obsolete. And you do that by looking at the data. You make data arguments, to the state. Nothing prove success like success. And so if you can show where it's working, that's why in the report we talk about being radical about looking at the data and monitoring that data through the key performance indicators and continuing to look at that data through the commitments, the 4 commitments that you all have made, so that you can create and write a narrative to the state or to anyone else about the success that you all are achieving here in the district. And in places where success needs to happen, the data also informs how you go about making decisions. So radically be in the data.
Thank you.
Dr. Kirkland, anyone who quotes from one of my chemistry professors who won their Nobel Prize for the creation of the buckyball, I'm a fan already. A couple of questions, and the first one is really more to Dr. Davis and Dr. Collier. I think in understanding some of the charts that break down for instance, the disconnect between our spend per school and our objectives around culturally responsive and supportive education. How does our tiered model impact that either positively or negatively? I think in kind of unpacking that slide, we need to understand kind of where we've done things that have benefited that, but also how that model has negative impacts as well.
That's a tough one. So I think, okay, I was going to try. I was going to tell you just preliminary. I mean, I know, we have the tiered staffing model, which does give more supports to some buildings based on what we see around student needs. And so that's actually the slide where it talked about the school spending. I actually want to dive into that more, just so I could better understand where those discrepancies are coming in, because we know that we have established a model that's supposed to help address some of the inequities that would be there if we were just giving every school the same thing. So I think what I would say to this, I don't want to try to just answer. I want us to really dig into, for me to even know and understand what is it that's causing some of the variances that seem to be not aligned with our tiered staffing model. So,
my other question is really, if you were advising the board at a governance level, what are the types of questions or the types of things that you would encourage us to keep our eye on to help ensure that as a district, as the people responsible for the ultimate steps, that we're asking the right questions to make sure that we are progressing the work?
That's a great question. I think one thing that I would do, if just being interested in education, interested in educational change, transformations of district, is buy a few books. One book is, Street Data. And that book helps us to understand what other kinds of data things we can look for in order to transform districts. Things like joy and happiness, in our students are huge indicators of how successful a district can be. Right, and so beginning to get these other and pay attention and focus on and center these other kind of data pieces that are in some ways leading indicators to some of the big things that everybody want to hear or see. Graduation rates, persistence to college, in wellness, and so I would begin to think about, what some of the street data is, as it pertains to and gives voice to the people, that the district serves, right? The other kind of thing or kind of question I think it's important as a district, to have is, monitor investments. Are we investing money in the right things? And what that simply means, if there's a culturally responsive, sustaining education, model that's meant to provide the kinds of experiences that are most responsive to the students that you have in a district, but also not only respond to what their needs are, but in some ways sustain who they are, through that experience. Are we allocating resources in ways that can help us to accomplish that goal? And I think the third thing as a board that I would think about, ways to empower, the people who are doing the work right, in the district. And this can come through, moments of celebration, in a series of other things that can galvanize, a community. Where I've seen school transformation happen and happen radically is when you have, all the players, key stakeholders, in some ways, understanding that they have a role to play in transformation, but in some ways are being held accountable and have a vision for what that, change is. And I think the board has a role to play in terms of setting that vision, monitoring that vision, and encouraging that vision across the district with all key stakeholders.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For that. Any other questions? Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kirkland. And I would just add, this is really challenging work. And I just want to just kind of name and put out there that it's really difficult to try to move in this direction because many people are fearful of just the term culturally responsive teaching and practices and what that means. And unfortunately, I feel like there is a movement across the country to make people afraid of that and to push back and feel like certain groups are being targeted or blamed, but that's not what culturally responsive teaching and practices is about at all. It's not really even about the adults, except that as adults, we have to make sure that we are addressing the needs of our children. It's about the children that we serve. And it's us thinking about how are we taking into consideration the cultures of our children, and the culture of the children means so much to their learning experience. It's not something that we can ignore and be able to really reach them and help them move academically or socially or in any other way. We have to acknowledge the cultures that they bring, and we have to respect that, and we have to learn how to integrate the culture into the classroom in a really authentic and meaningful way. And so I just want to just put that out there, that I recognize that sometimes these conversations are hard for people, but I want to say clearly, if there's any educators in our district that think it's about pointing a finger at any person or placing blame, that is not what culturally responsive teaching and practices is about at all. The focus is on our children and doing what is best for our children. And I think that most of us have that innate, we do it naturally to care about our children and to do what's best for them. When we come into the educational setting, we have to come into this setting with that same mindset as if they're our children and do what's best for them. And what's best for them is often what's associated and tied into their home and to their neighborhood and their lives. And it's acknowledging those lived experiences and not ignoring them as if that's something that's not valuable in this classroom. It is. It is extremely valuable. So culturally responsive teaching and practices is about what is good for children. I just want to just put that out there. It's what's good for children.
Thank you, Dr. Collier. So our next item on the agenda is the board chair report, which is going to be very brief. One of the things that I have been promising folks is liaison identification. I'm just going to run through the list. I'll have the board secretary send it out tomorrow, and I'll also make an ask in the process. For MSBA, Tanisha Ford is going to serve on the MSBA Board of Directors as our representative. Jamaica Kendricks and Ms. Ford will also serve as delegates in the general body of the MSBA, and I'll kind of be the backup. Council of Great City Schools, Ms. Buckner will serve as the primary liaison and will identify an alternate or second person as well. Again, some of these roles we're going to have to work on because we still are waiting on the seventh player to be named. Cooperating School Districts of Greater Kansas City, Monica Curls is going to serve as our primary liaison. Again, that doesn't mean that the rest of us won't be invited to and encouraged to attend those meetings, but she'll be our primary connecting point for the cooperating school districts. The Kansas City Public Schools Education Foundation, Josh Jackaway is going to serve as our liaison to that board. The facilitating team related to the bond will be Monica Curls and myself. The NSBA liaison is to be determined. Moving forward together, Ms. Kendricks and I will serve as the liaison to the steering group. And then I will be soliciting all of you to sign up for a role as the liaison to each of the 6 committees that were identified in the earlier presentation tonight: academic and student performance, safe schools, enrollment marketing, educational landscape, economic development, and bond. That is a different committee than the facilitating team. So I'll be asking each of you to kind of give me some ranked choice voting, and then we'll identify those liaison roles as well. So just wanted to that's kind of been percolating, but I haven't actually said it, so now it's done. And with that, I'm going to turn, I should actually have my script so that I do this formally. I recognize Dr. Collier. The chair recognizes Dr. Collier recognize the superintendent, Dr. Collier, related to the master's transportation business item.
All right, we have one regular business item, and this was really pressing, and we needed to get this to the board now, so we did not wait until the business meeting. But as we all know, as a district, we've had some challenges this year around our transportation. And we've tried many things, we've looked at what we can do, but I think we've come to a solution that may be very helpful for us as we move forward. We are looking at purchasing 10 minibuses. But in addition to, I should just read what's on the paper, right? So that way I don't miss anything. I just wanted to give that background of why we're doing this. But the administration recommends approval for the purchase of 10 Type A mini school buses for Masters Transportation in the amount of $829,000. The purchase of additional mini school buses is in direct response to the national bus driver shortage that has impacted service to KCPS students. Procuring additional minibuses will allow KCPS to also hire full-time bus drivers that work under the direction of the KCPS administration, responding to real-time transportation needs in an effort to reduce service disruption to students and families during the 23-24 school year.
Thank you, Dr. Collier. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
No, do we have a second?
Second.
It is moved and seconded to approve the contract with Masters Transportation. Is there any debate or questions related to this motion? Seeing none, Lisa, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Curls?
Yes.
Ms. Ford?
Yes.
Mr. Jackaway?
Yes.
Ms. Kendricks?
Yes.
Ms. Cortez?
Yes. With that, there is a majority. The recommendation to approve the contract with Masters Transportation is approved. At this point, Lisa, are there any outstanding action items from this evening?
I do not have any at this point.
So the only one I'm going to add to your list is to follow up with the board to get their questions related to the presentations this evening so that we can compile those and kind of wrestle through those as we look to a workshop in the summer. Thank you. The chair recognizes Dr. Collier to introduce the business items for the May 24th, 2023 business meeting.
All right. At this time, we have 5 business items. The first is Greater Kansas City Link, and that's for $580,530. We have GRE Electric for $1,203,197. McCown Gordon, $1,159,235. SGI for $1,159,235. And then finally, Centegix for $1,084,100.
Thank you very much. The next meeting of the Board of Directors is May 24th, 2023. This meeting is adjourned. On time.